Yeah. Good afternoon to all of you. It is now live streaming. Thank you very much for the response on that. And at least confirm whether my voice is audible or not, so that it will be easy for you to understand. Myself, DNS Oscar. Already yesterday I started with the class that is financial services. In that, when we are talking about the financial services study, I have clearly mentioned about what is the finance and how these financial services are going and the financial facility from the person who is requirement of the finance and the person who is a lender. Here, the financial services subject, as I told you very clearly in the yesterday's class itself, unless you follow in a regular basis, this will be a difficult task for you to understand. So, in the yesterday's class, we have started with the main important aspect of the financial services. In that, what is a financial service? We just briefly recapitulate what we have studied in the previous class, and then we will proceed to the today's class. Actually, financial services, before going to the financial services, let us now first understand about what is the financial system. And this is the unit one I'm talking about. And in the case of unit one, financial system plays an important role in the economy. And what is a financial system? That is one. Yes. What is a financial system? It is part of the economic structure. It's an art structure and how it will be. A financial system basically consists of broadly various financial institutions, that is financial markets, financial instruments, securities, and financial services. In general term, we can say that the financial institutions and financial markets, we talk about capital market, we talk about the securities market. In the subject business finance, you have clearly understood about the various types of market, that is capital market, money market, and all. So they are all comes under the financial markets. Then coming to the, what are the financial instruments? When we are talking about financial instruments, we basically talk about the various types of instruments like shares, debentures. You are in the sixth semester. I hope you are known about these technical terms. That is, equity shares are traded in the stock market. Then preference shares, they are traded, and also debentures, they are given loan bonds, and then finally various mutual fund instruments also they are considered as an important element. All these things they're called as financial products. When we are talking about financial instruments, that is called as commercial paper, promissory note, checks, etc. They all will participate in the process of exchanging the funds of one person to another. Okay. So before proceeding to that, let me just take a snip of that. Snip. So as I told you, in the case of this, when we are talking about the financial services, the primary objective of these financial system is to facilitate the transfer of savings from the saver to the person who is basically acquiring the finance. So when we are talking about the financial intermediary, one more term I used yesterday, Financial intermediary is one institution which provides the basic needs for the purpose of transferring the funds from the person who is having the financial resources and to the person who is having. Yeah, right. It is now. This is complete. This process is complete now. So then when we are talking about the financial services, a person who is having the financial requirements, a person who is having the financial resources, he is ready to put his financial resources to the needy person. Because of that, he will be able to get some sort of interest on that. This process of arranging the funds from the person who is having a need, from the person who is having a requirement, who is having a surplus of the money. If a person, a participant has enabled closer captioning. When we're talking about this particular process, financial services, we're looking the mobilization of financial resources. Then we talk about the characteristics of finances. In the case of the characteristics of financial resources, I should share this process of the PPT also. Then the main important characteristics of the financial services, that is intangibility and derivative. Then we talked about the importance of financial services, process of importance of financial services. I clearly explained about the various aspects, that is economic growth, promotion stage. The financial services are mostly used for the purpose of economic growth, promotional strategies, and capital formation process, employment opportunity, and also at the same time, that is contribution to the gross national product and provision of liquidity. All these are very, very important aspects. Then we have given a point on the players of financial systems, that is, who are the various players in the financial system. So in that, already, as I told you clearly, that is capital market and capital market and money market are the two important players in this. Then after that, we have clearly understood about the what are the various types of services. Then I will just share this one again so that you will be able to follow very clearly. This one is already shared yesterday, and a conclusion made over this one. When we're talking about this financial services, characteristics of financial services is already given to you in the previous class. Then financial assets are classified into two, that is fixed assets, that is said to be financial assets versus real assets. Then financial assets basically they are intangible nature and they are considered as the clients of the company and agency. Real assets, they are mostly immovable assets. They always comes under the part of the more higher amount of returns will be accepted. But there is a physical transfer of assets from one person another in case of immovable or the real assets, but in the case of the financial assets, only the claim against a particular product, claim against a financial product. That means a claim against the particular financial product. For example, a share, for example, a debenture, for example, a policy, insurance policy. All this comes under the financial assets. So then the claim can be transferable, but the other aspects cannot be transferable. Then who are the players in the financial market? Already that point where we are now talking about capital market, money market. Capital market is a market where the financial services are provided for a very longer duration than the more amount of money. And whereas money market operations, they are considered as in the case of money market, mostly short-term borrowings are provided. Short-term borrowings are provided. They will provide short-term nature, and they normally for the period of 3 to 5 years. And so. Then the financial services that are provided is basically gives under the two categories, that is fund-based and then it is fee-based. This part is given in your syllabus, that is called the unit number 2. In the unit number 2, basically fund-based financial services are provided. Actually, what is the meaning of fund-based financial services? That we have to understand here. Fund-based financial services are arranged for the customers by an financial intermediary by charging certain percentage of interest, and the amount of funds are utilized by the business. So, example, providing the venture capital for the startup organizations, etc. When we are providing some startup amount for the venture capital, that is one. So, in this case of fund-based financial services, the physical amount will be provided to that. There is a certain amount of capital is provided to the a certain amount of capital is also to be provided to the organization on a particular interest percentage basis. Here, the main important point is to understand that the fund amount is transferred from the financial intermediary to the borrower. Then what are the other, what type of factors, what type of financial services will come under fund-based financial services? First one is lease financing. Second one, hire purchase financing, consumer credit, factoring and forfeiting, venture capital financing, housing finance, bill discounting, insurance services, and then mutual funds. These are some of the important fund-based financial services which we discussed in the yesterday's class actually. Then coming to the unit 3, we talk about the financial services which are based on the fees-based. This point where we ended up the class yesterday in this particular one. So in the case of fees-based financial services, fees-based financial services, these are also called as advisory services. These are also called as advisory services or ancillary financial services. The financial intermediaries will charge a specific fees or a commission for renting the service. So in the case of this, instead of transferring huge amount and charging interest on that, they will provide a service, and for that particular service, they are used to charge the amount of expenditure, the amount of fees are this one. Amount of fees charged on this. So, on a particular fees basis, these are given for the, these services are provided for the person who is in the requirement. Then, next, coming to the other aspect in this now. So, what are the fees-based services we are going to have? One is issue management services. And now, what is actually called the issue management service? In the case of issue management, this topic is there in the unit number 3, page number also I will quote so that you can read and understand on this one. So, in the page number 31, it is mentioned. The page number 31 of your material. So, issue management services. Basically, in the case of issue management services, the new issue of shares is provided in the market. When any company is bringing out a new issue of shares into the market, they require a lot of services. Then how to underwrite the shares, how to promote the shares, and how to give various other legal aspects in this. All these services are provided by the various merchant banking institutions. That is merchant banking institutions are there. Out of that, the one or the other bank also will participate, and these issues are managed. The issue means here we talk about share issue. Issue management services is very prominent service that is raising a fresh capital to the public sector industrial. The new issue provides three types of services for the greater significance. One is first is origination. Origination means how the funds are brought up in the form of the capital, how the funds are brought up into the how much of funds are to be generated, and so on. Then we talk about the portfolio. Second one is underwriting. In case of underwriting, the second important aspect is when the company is not sure or when company is not guaranteed when company is not guaranteed that he can sell all its shares, it will engage an underwriter who will give guarantee for the purpose of subscribing to the share capital. Then distribution. Distribution is a function of sale of securities to the investors altogether. This service is performed by a broker as well as an agent. Then that is one. This is all issue management services is the prominent service which are provided by the merchant banking organization. Then we go by the second one that is called as portfolio management services. In the case of portfolio management services, this is very popularly known as stockbroking services. When a person wants to invest in the money market, in the stock market, he may not be able to understand which share is to be purchased, which share is to be sold, at what time to buy, at what time to sell. In this process, that comes under the portfolio management. So a body of professionally qualified professional management institutions are a body of professionally qualified persons undertaking the assignment of managing the individual investor's portfolio. What is a portfolio? Portfolio is a combination of securities. For example, I buy X company share, then I buy Y company share, then I will buy B company share, then X, Y plus B. All together, I may be having three company shares. All the three company shares put together, that is called as a portfolio. In simple language, you can understand that portfolio is a combination of securities. Portfolio is nothing but a combination of securities. When we are talking about the combination of securities, we can clearly understand. So the combination of securities need not be always in the form of shares. So different company shares, it may be, different assets maybe, and so on. Then corporate counsel. Here, before going to the portfolio, completing the portfolio management. Then merchant bankers provide, this is given the paragraph number 3.4. Merchant banks, they will provide various types of portfolio services like buy and sell securities, fulfilling the company's requirements, various regulatory frameworks, and so on. Safe custody of securities is also an important prominent prominent assistance or service that are provided by the financial. Corporate counseling. In this case of corporate counseling, the government and on the basis of government and economic policies, these financial services institutions, they will provide help to the corporates. So when to diversify a particular product, how to appraise a product line, how to analyze the growth of a particular sector, and so on. All these are provided. And merchant banking services, merchant banks are nothing but mostly commercial banks only. Now, if you go to State Bank of India, you can deposit money, you can withdraw money, you can invest in shares, you can have wealth management, and so on. They're multi-dimensional. So in such a case, arrangement of funds for the organizations and guiding aspect for the various investments. Then coming to the loan syndication. In the case of loan syndication, when a particular borrower wants a huge sum of money, instead of depending on one bank, he will give a mandate, mandate to one bank to borrow money on behalf of him. So, what in the case of loan syndication, if I approach one bank, then I will authorize that bank, which is called as a lead bank, then I will authorize that bank to collect funds or get borrowings, get funds on behalf of him. And then all the banks, other banks put together, along with the lead manager, they will provide services. This is also on the basis of fees-based work. Then mergers and acquisitions. This is known to you because you are a commerce student. Merger is nothing but a group of, it is a combination of two or more companies put together. Then acquisition is one, buying of one company by the another. This is already there in your FI advanced accounting also. So this, when you are doing a merger or you are doing an acquisition of one company with another, then in such a case, there are a lot of legal processes to be followed. In this legal process, various companies will provide the financial services. Then merchant capital restructuring services. How to restructure the capital? What is the question of capital structure, first of all? So what is the meaning of a capital structure? Capital structure basically tells us about the composition of the debt and equity. How much is the ownership funds? How much is the debt funds? How much is the loan funds? How much is the this one? How much is the loan borrowings? And how much is the ownership capital? This combination is set to be capital structure. So how to adjust this one? That is an important fact. So whether you want to have more amount of equity or you want to have less amount of equity. If you have to have more amount of debt or less amount of debt, like that, restructuring of the capital is also possible with the help of financial service organization. Then coming to the merchant banking, already every part is taken care of merchant banking only. There is nothing to specially study about merchant banking organizations. So they will advise licensing aspect and obtaining consent from the central government, state government, preparation of economic reports, technical reports, financial reports, feasibility reports, and all, and helps in raising rupees from foreign currency, rupees helps to get the rupee resources from financial institutions. And if any foreign currency requirements are there, that is also considered to be taken care of. And merchant banking organizations, they are in the form of trusts somewhere, and they will manage the trusts, and recruitment of professional services is also possible by them. Then we go for the next one, that is called as credit rating services. This is fee-based financial services. In case of fee-based financial services, we talk about the credit rating is a credit rating service. What is actually the meaning of a credit rating? When a company is issuing any sort of debt instrument, say for example, a debenture or a bond or equity share or a commercial paper or all, then how far that company is able to provide interest for us, then how far the company is able to repay that money back to us, all these aspects are doubtful for the investor. But if I am investing in the bond of, say, X company limited, when I say for example, 10 lakhs, if I invest in X company bond, I must be guaranteed to the extent that, yes, I can get interest on that. At the maturity date, I must be able to get back my money. So for this extent, to this extent, at the same time, there must be some sort of rating. Then in nowadays, for every aspect, we are seeing ratings. Even for a hotel, we first search in the rating, then only we are preferring. Like that, when you are investing your hard-earned money, you have to identify what is the rating given by the financial agencies for a particular type of instrument. So this is given in page number 37 when we are talking about. That is one, is that credit rating is process compulsory for the debt instruments in this, whereas the equity issues is optional. Credit rating is not compulsory for the equity share process, whereas credit rating is compulsory for the various other aspects like bonds and commercial papers, etc. So in case of bond rating process, the rating of bonds or debt securities, the credit rating is given as A+++, like that different symbols are given, and on the basis of different symbols, the credit rating is done. Then bond rating, equity rating, commercial paper rating, these are various aspects that we have to understand. Then depository and custodian services. Depository services, securities from the deposited, they are traded in the electronic services. Then it will reduce the cost of transaction. Then lastly, one more important aspect that is called as a crowdfunding. Nowadays, this crowdfunding process is gaining a lot of importance. So instead of borrowing the money from the different organizations or different institutions, we basically go by the generating the resources from various institutions at the beginning of the organizational setup itself. So the beginning of the organizational setup itself, When I want to start up a new business organization, then I will identify a person, few persons who are really interested to invest in that. Then I will collect the money from them. With the help of all the people, then I will gather the funds and then it is put to the business activity. This is a very modern technique which has evolved in the year 2009. It's a 2009. And it is registered members platform is created for the crowdfunding, and all the registered members can contribute to the capital through e-wallets. They can transfer their portion of the investment through the e-wallet and then like PayPal, Paytm, MobiLink, and so. For every organizational member, there is a separate transaction charges as well as commission to the platform to also provide. These is the various aspects that are going for the fee-based financial services, right? Then this is all about the block one. So to lump sum it, actually we started this particular block with the meaning of financial services, mobilization of investments, savings and all. That is characteristics of financial services. Then financial assets versus real assets. Then players in financial markets. Then we talked about unit 2, that is fund-based financial services, where the provider of funds. Then what are the various fund-based services in this? Then unit number 3 is basically talking about fees-based financial services. And then what are the various types of fees-based services we have clearly explained on. With that, the block 1 is, I have summarized, I tried to my level best to provide the summary of the unit block 1. Then proceed to the block 2. Proceed to the block 2. Block 2, it is talking about basically various aspects which the financial institution or financial markets are able to provide. So, in the case of various aspects, first one is said to be leasing, hire purchase, and leasing, hire purchase, and also leasing, hire purchase, and venture capital. Then we talk about the unit 4, that is out of that leasing. First, venture capital. In the block 2, actually 3 subunits are given. That is, one is leasing, second one is hire purchase, third one is venture capital. Already, what is that we broadly studied in the case of block 1. In the block 1, we understood about what is the leasing services, what are hire purchase services, what are the venture capital services, and all. Now, let us go in an elaborate way on these aspects now. In the case of unit 4, that is the first one is the leasing aspect. When we are talking about lease, that is actually what is the meaning of a lease that we have to understand. When we are going for the lease aspect, lease is basically an agreement between the two parties that is called as lessee and lessor. When lessee and lessor, when lessee and lessor, both the parties will agree upon. So lease is an agreement, as we have studied in the financial accounting also. Agreement between the two parties, that is namely lessee and lessor. Leasing or hire purchase or venture capital. Leasing basically an agreement between the two parties that is called a lessee and lessor. Lease is the holder of right to use an asset. In the financial accounting also, we come across this process of leasing, and leasing basically comes out with that. When instead of buying a total asset, instead of buying an asset, let us acquire it from the various from the other person and use it for the benefit, and finally then return back or then transfer. In the case of leasing, what is the opportunity here is that instead of going for a direct buying, the required person can take it on an agreement basis, that one. So it is an agreement between two parties. That is one. Lessee is the holder of the right to use the asset. Lessor is the person who is giving the, who is having that asset, and a lessor is the owner of the asset. He will allow the lessee to use that particular asset. And in between lessor and lessee, there is an agreement that is called as a lease agreement. So lessor is the owner, lessee is the person who requires the truth, and he will have a right because of the lease agreement to use the asset. And then finally, a lease agreement is an agreement which goes on taking the various terms into consideration of that. So what are the various terms? All that will be a legal aspect in this. And what are the various conditions in which this particular leasing agreements make out? Normally, we go by leasing. Whenever we talk about leasing, we find out about coal mine leasing, oil refineries leasing, and so on and so forth. So mostly oils, minerals, natural gases, and other non-regenerative sources are mostly exploited by use of lease. So take the land for the lease and explore the mine, explore the coal, explore the oil, and so on. And finally, the land will be returned back to the owner. That's all. Then leasing agreement for such an important portion will be there in that. And property held for the lease is also accounted as an investment property only. These are the important aspects of that. So then what are the essential elements of the lease? This is basically an essay question which is a very essay question for the examination point of view. Also, it is an important one. Essential elements of leasing. So when essential element, that this is given in the paragraph number 4.3. So whenever we talk about a lease agreement, what are the various minimum requirements that a particular lease agreement should have? One is parties to the contract. That is, in general, there are basically two parties to the contract. One is a lease one. Already we discussed on that. That is lessee and lessor are the two parties to them. So in the case of leverage and lease transactions, a third party also may be a party to the contract. That's called a leveraged lease. That is a separate aspect here. Leveraged lease means when we are borrowing some money for the purpose of taking lease from the other party who will have a basic interest over that one. So that then that party also will be a part to the leasing agreement. Second is the asset. So unless asset is there, lease agreement is not valid. So asset for which asset which is used for the purpose of generating some sort of income. Say for example, land. Land is an asset. Or other machine. Machine also may be possible for leasing. So then what is the machine? What is the land? That is considered as an asset. So asset is the subject matter. That is lease contract may be an asset. It may be a property, or it may be an equipment, or it may be any other important aspect in that. Then consideration. When we are talking about the consideration, when lessor will not give the asset at free of cost, he needs certain amount for the as a return for the purpose of handing over the asset to the lessee. So in such a case, lessor lease rental amount is fixed in the case of lease agreement, and that amount is to be paid by the lessee to the lessor on a predetermined phase, whether it may be yearly lease payment or it may be one-time payment and so on. So the consideration is there must be a consideration for the lease agreement, otherwise agreement is not valid. As per the contract act also you have studied about this one. The right to use an asset must be given to the lessee for a consideration Then lease rental is decided by taking two considerations in that. That how much of investment asset, what is the life of the asset, what is the depreciation of the asset, and how much is the cost of capital for the lessor, and all these aspects will be considered. Then coming to the next aspect, lease period. What is the lease period? The contract period. For how many years the period is given for that. These are the important aspects that we have to understand. A contract is usually an undertaking for a fixed period. It may be sometimes extended for the life of the entire asset also. As long as asset is there, as long as asset is there, we will go by the lease process. That also is possible. So, how much period that is made out for that lease period is important. Whether it is a fixed period or till the end of the asset or everlasting asset. Sometimes we say that coal mine lease. Till the entire coal is digged out, the lease will continue. Or it may be for a period of specific period, say for 10 years lease or 15 years lease, like that. So either it may be lease period, may be fixed period, or till the complete expiration of that particular lease value. Then user. Who is the user here? Lease agreement. The possession of the asset will be with the lessee, who gets the right to use an asset during the agreement period. So user will be the lessee only, but not the lessor. That is why the very, very important is that once lease agreement is complete, the lessor will not have a much more right over the particular asset. The only lessee will be there in that. Right in the sense, he will have property rights, that's no matter. But so all the aspects that are taken care of by the lessee only. Next, the point is that ownership of the asset, as it is told that the ownership of assets remains with the lessor only during the tenure of the lease agreement, but it will not be transferred. So termination of the contract is also an important element in that. So how much terms of conditions, how to terminate the contract, or at when the contract is terminated, how much is the life of that? If any problem is there between the two parties, how to terminate the contract, lease contract. All these aspects are also must be mentioned in the case of a lease agreement. Then lastly, the very, very important aspect is that depreciation. Then in the case of depreciation, the claimable by the owner of the asset, even though the lessor is not using the asset. So whereas lessee cannot claim the depreciation ever after using the asset. This is the technical aspect of it. Even though the lessor is not physically using the asset, he can claim for the depreciation of the asset, whereas the lessee, even though he is physically using that particular asset, he is not entitled for the purpose of using that particular asset. These are the main important essential elements of the leasing. This is a very, very important. So then coming to the types of lease. Actually, this is mentioned in the case of the para 4.7 and 4.4. So in the case of that, the classification is made as two parts. One is financial lease, second one is an operational lease. In the case of financial lease, second one operational lease. So when we are talking about financial lease, so financial lease means we are giving the asset for the lease process on the basis of the financial conditions of the. So in the case of financial lease, there are four subparts on that. Four types are there. One is said to be sale and lease back. First one, sale and lease back. Second is levered lease, full and non-payment lease, cross-border lease. Sale and lease back. That means in first financial lease type, we first sell the asset to the person and then again we will take back from him as a lease. So we will transfer the ownership right to the third party, then we take the asset as a lease. Then in case of leveraged lease, the process of leveraging is that when we are going with that, so we go by the leveraged lease, lessor will provide, sorry, once the lessee identifies the asset, lessor purchases either by his own funds or from the borrowed funds. So here, when lessee is identified first, that who is going to take this particular asset as a lease, we will identify. Depending on his requirements, we buy as a lessor, we buy the asset either by with our own funds or with the funds borrowed from the other party. Then lessor will find that purchase of asset with more than 80% of the bank finances sometimes. This process is called as leverage buying, leverage lease. So in this process, what is the advantage is that instead of buying an asset first, then identifying a person who wants it on lease, all this is not be there. And whereas we first identify a lessee, and basing on his requirements, we will buy the asset with the help of either own funds or with the help of the borrowed funds. In these two processes, there will be either if the funds are borrowed, 80% of the funds or 75% of the funds are borrowed, then the asset is mortgaged to the person who provides the finance. I repeat, the asset is mortgaged to the person who financed the asset, and again that is given to the lessee for the purpose of lease. This is about the leveraged lease. Then, a cross-border lease is one where the assets are leased out from one country to the other. These are the important types. And last one, operating lease. In the case of operating lease, it is a general condition such that lease agreement does not contain a clause. In the case of operating lease, only the asset is leased for the purpose of using only the just 1 second. So in the case of ownership lease, the lease agreement contains the clause of transferring the asset to the lessee for the lease period only. Then it is operational lease is 75% of the economic asset is given. Then the remaining 25% will be held up with that. So only operating lease is for using the asset and deriving the benefit. In the 4.7 paragraph, which is clearly in given page number 3, the differences are made out between these two. Financial lease, the transfership of asset ownership may be there in the case of financial lease. Whether it may or may not be transferred by, whether the asset may or may not be transferred by the lessor to the lessee. Whereas in case of operating lease, the ownership of the asset remains with the lessor only. The entire lease period, no transfer of ownership will be there at all. This is an important thing. The lease is treated as a loan for that, and the procurement of asset and ownership will be in the name of the lessee, will not be there. So lessee is treated as a rental. Then third point is lease asset can be shown as an asset in the balance sheet of the lessee, in the balance sheet, whereas lease asset cannot be shown as an asset in the balance sheet in case of the operational lease. So these are the various aspects that you have to understand. Cancellation of lease agreement lies with the lessee in case of operational lease, whereas lessee also can cancel the lease agreement in case of operational lease. So these are the various aspects, and various accounting treatment process is also there in that. And what are the advantages of the limitations of leasing is given in the paragraph, page number 54 also. The main advantages of leasing is permit alternative use of funds. When more money is available, instead of buying an asset, they can go for the utilization of this money and other aspects. Of the balance sheet financing, it will not reflect in the balance sheet process. Flexibility is there. If the lessee and lessor are not satisfied, they can cancel the lease agreement altogether. Then protection against the obsolescence. If we buy a particular asset, it may or may not continue for a further period of time because of so much of technological advancements. If I buy a machine and it get obsoleted, then finally the loss is to be borne by the person who is a buyer. But in case of lease agreement, the asset can be returned back to the lessor. So that is the possibility is there. And obsolescence is a problem, risk will not be there in that. And the protection against obsolescence. 100% of financing is there in case of the operational lease. And basically, this lease and lease agreements are very beneficial to the very beneficial to the small firms which may not be able to afford the huge amounts for the purchase of the amount. These are the various aspects. So with this, but along with that, there are so many limitations also there. It involves actually higher the cost than that, then risk taking away of the asset by the lessor. Sometimes the lessor may reject the lease agreement and he can cancel that and he can take back the asset, and loss of salvage value, that is all, and effect of termination process. All these aspects will be there in that. Huge competition is also there in the market for this one. These are the various aspects that a person has to understand in case of leasing. Okay. Thank you. All the best. Bye.